Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Rohan Sylvester, and I'm a recruitment evangelist with the marketing team at Indeed India. Extremely happy to welcome you all to the third episode of Top Jobs in India, an initiative to help people find jobs. A one of it, a one of a kind series brought to you by Indeed and People Matters. For those of you who may not know, Indeed is the world's number one job site with over 25 crore job seekers using us across the globe, using us every month to find their next big opportunity. If you are looking for your next great opportunity, just like the 25 crore people across the globe, just log on to Indeed.com and start searching. Now, looking for a new job is probably one of the most difficult and stressful things that anyone has to do. There are so many things to consider. Will I be a perfect fit for the new role? What is the culture of the company that I want to be a part of? What will my onboarding process look like, particularly now? And there are several more questions that are typically rattling around in our brains while we're looking for and applying for new roles. And these questions are only amplified right now with everything that's happening and the fact that everything has gone completely virtual. So we thought, why not give everybody a first-hand view of what it's like to work for some of the top companies in India? And that's why we decided to have this hiring week. This initiative is a small effort by Indeed to help job seekers understand a little better and get a few insights into some of the top companies in India. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Mr. Prashant Bhatnagar, Director of Human Resources at Credit Suisse. Prashant has over 20 years of experience in building and leading high performing teams. And I am going to be picking Prashant's brain today with some really interesting questions to ensure that all our viewers who have joined us today understand Credit Suisse a little better. So thanks for joining us, Prashant, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you for the opportunity. As you rightly said, these are challenging times for many amongst us, and any way we can help potential job seekers on what the employers are seeking today will be a step in that direction. So I look forward to sharing some of our perspectives and also answering any questions the audience may have.
That's great. Now, before we jump into the questions, let me also give everyone a quick overview of Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse is a massive company, and I'm sure it does not need any introduction, but I think I will still take a couple of seconds to introduce the organization as well. Credit Suisse AG is one of the world's leading financial services providers and is part of the Credit Suisse group of companies. Their strategy builds on Credit Suisse's core strength, its position as a leading wealth manager, its specialist investment banking capabilities, and its strong presence in their home market of Switzerland. Credit Suisse currently employs approximately 48,000 people across the globe. And in India, Credit Suisse provides investment banking, brokerage, wealth management, and commercial banking services, as well as foreign exchange and debt capital market products. They also have several centers in India which provide services to the bank's divisions globally across various technology and business corporate functions. To all our viewers, if you want to know anything specific about Credit Suisse, please post your questions in the comment section, which is on the right side of your screen. If you're watching this episode on Facebook or YouTube channels, it will look very similar and the questions can be posted on the right. Feel free to post your questions and we'll try and answer most of them. So keep the questions flowing. And let's dive into the Q&A section with Prashant. The first thing
We'll wait for Rohan to join. I believe he's having some difficulties with the internet, which, as you can imagine, is also a consequence of us trying to make technology work at scale and in ways that uh, perhaps it wasn't planned to. And I know what Rohan was planning on asking as to potentially some of the steps that we may have taken as an organization. And I think one of the steps that you can imagine is required and was taken by the firm was to invest and upgrade its technology infrastructure, given the fact that over 90% of the people which were once operating from the office had to move in to work remotely. That was the cue I had. So Rohan, now that you're back on live, I'll
Sorry,
hand it back to
apologies.
you.
I just got knocked out. I said, so there's a lot of talk about unemployment in the news. So how do you foresee the overall job market in India shaping up in the next 6 to 9 months, specifically in the BFSI domain?
Sure. So Rohan, I think if you look at the industry that we are, you look at the mature markets and you look at economies like ours. Clearly, when you see the results being announced by the banks, particularly BFSI, there is a return of strength to both revenue but also profitability across to that. And when you begin to look at that, consequently, the jobs will follow. Now, depending upon the nature of the industry you are in, if you look at, for example, insurance, tremendous opportunities right now because the insurance rates have gone up. In certain cases, unless you are in kind of certain type of insurance categories. But when you look at banking, the need for people to bank continues to be high in this environment. So over the next 6 to 9 months, I think after that blip of jobs that were either put on hold or deferred for some time, we anticipate job levels to go back to the pre-COVID levels, what they were. They did dip for the first 6 months of the year, but we do anticipate them going back to the original levels pre-pandemic.
But that's excellent news to hear because I'm pretty sure a lot of job seekers right now are worried about the number of jobs that are out there, and if there are enough jobs for everybody. And it's always great news to hear that we should be going back to pre-COVID levels. My next question is, when you look at Credit Suisse, what are some of the major roles that you're hiring for right now and planning to hire over the next 6 to 9 months?
Sure. As you were describing in our introduction, we do a number of kind of services out of India for us, both as a business corporate center, delivering kind of work to many of our divisions globally, but also some of the work in the banking space in India. As was the case previously, we continue to have a number of jobs in those divisions, be it technology, be it in the area of risk and compliance, be it in the area of private banking, and so on and so forth. All of those jobs are available even today as they were available previously. And I'm sure we can share a link with our viewers in terms of what those jobs are so that they can find those jobs and learn more about them, which are all available on our public website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great to hear. My next question is more about locations. And I know this is a very interesting question to ask, particularly in these times. As you can I'm sure the viewers can see, we are both at home taking this call. So are there any specific locations that you're planning to hire for? And also, given the fact that a lot of companies are pivoting towards a hybrid workforce, is Credit Suisse planning to open up, some of the roles completely remote, just for only remote work? Maybe there's some long-term workforce strategy that you can talk about.
Sure. Thank you. So Credit Suisse in India has predominantly presence across Pune, Mumbai, Gurgaon, and Bangalore. Those are our kind of big presence that we operate from. And as you rightly said, in today's time, there are individuals who are operating from cities other than these four because they're either working remotely, they've gone back to their kind of where their family presence is, and so on and so forth. From a response to the pandemic situation, at least in India, we've allowed what we call a phase one working from office through end of the year, which means most of the individuals which would perhaps be deemed as non-critical do not have to be in the office in these cities through the end of the year, possibly early next year as well. So if you are a job seeker today, so let's say sitting in Jammu and Kashmir and wants to consider applying for a job with us eventually in Pune or Mumbai or Bangalore, the good news is you can apply for a job now, get interviewed, and if you're found qualified, given an offer, but continue working from Jammu and Kashmir through the period, it is safe for all of us to return back to the office, which is not expected until early quarter of next year. So that's kind of the plan from that standpoint. Now we have, and given this situation, we are certainly evaluating other ways of working. What you're referring to is, are there certain roles which could be perhaps permanently remote, as an example? And we have this pilot going on in our offices in Switzerland, where we are evaluating what we call new ways of working. Based on the results of that finding, it is quite conceivable. However, what we have continued to do, as was the case previously, is continuing to focus on jobs that may be part time in nature, more so than before, and also jobs targeting individuals, for example, certain sections which have been denied of those opportunities because they took care of, for example, their family members or dependents. So we've run a program which we refer to as real returns, allowing women on break to come back from break into the workplace. So some of those practices continue, but from a longer term, only remote is a pilot, which results are awaited, and we'll see what the implications are for India.
That's great to hear, Prashant. And I'm glad that organizations such as yours are experimenting with this. I know it's not an easy decision to take, particularly in the BFSI segment. It can be, especially because of the data privacy rules that you're probably following. So I'm looking forward to hearing about Credit Suisse experiment outcome in the future, and all the best with that.
Thank you.
So my next question is a very interesting one, particularly because this is, I think, something that most job seekers would want to know. Let's say you were to apply for a job. Let's say I was to apply for a job at Credit Suisse. What would be the expectations from me in terms of skill sets or maybe work experience? What should I, at what level should I be? I know it's given, it's difficult given the diversity of the roles that you probably hire for. But if you could just talk about a few key roles and what Credit Suisse expects from candidates in these roles, I think it would be a great benefit to our viewers who are planning to apply for Credit Suisse.
Sure, Rohan. So, as you rightly said, each job will have what we call job specific role requirements. If you're joining technology teams, there will be certain requirements in technology. If you're joining a risk teams, compliance team, there'll be some specific expectations associated with the job. However, what is likely to be common across all jobs are what we call certain foundational behaviors. These behaviors are what we look for in every candidate, regardless of the job they're applying for. For example, are individuals focused on self learning? And how have they kept themselves up to pace in terms of the developments and advancements in their field? As an example, we believe is going to be foundational regardless of the job you're applying for. Similarly, we are looking for individuals who are curious, who are looking at alternative ways of solving the problem, who are good at even framing the problem, because half the time the framing of the problem itself leads to the solution discovery. So how do you think about that? We're looking for individuals who collaborate. We're looking for individuals who take ownership. We're looking for individuals who are able to drive decisions and move forward. So for us, those foundational principles and behaviors do not change. In fact, if one were to say, they become even more pronounced now because we are having to work remotely as opposed to coming together and working. So that ability to work in a collaborative manner, to look at different alternative solutions, to engage others, to transparently share, to continuously learn are foundational behaviors that we believe are required in every job that you apply for at Credit Suisse.
That's a Thanks for that great answer, Prashant. And it really highlights that in these times, and I'm hearing this from several organizations, self-motivated, self-learning, particularly since you're working from home, that's going to be a big ask from organizations for job seekers. And any job seekers who are looking to apply right now should be looking at this as a skill set that they should improve if they don't have it. I mean, if they have it, and gain if they don't. So self-motivation and self-learning. My next question is a bit of a personal one, and I think something most people here, could, if they're working still, could kind of relate to. 8 months back, all of us suddenly started working from home, and I still remember that day very vividly. It was March 6th when all of us at Indeed started working from home, and I was very unsure of what the experience would look like. And honestly, for me personally, the role that I have involves me visiting clients at their offices and discussing things with them. So that just completely changed overnight, right? And 8 months later, I can say that it has been a great journey for me. Like, I have truly enjoyed this opportunity to work like this. It has forced me to change a lot about myself. And I mean change for the better, obviously. And I wanted to understand from you how it has been with Credit Suisse. Has Credit Suisse made any major changes to, say, the assessment and interview process for candidates during this pandemic?
Yes, indeed, Rohan. I think each one of us can perhaps kind of narrate the experience, what they were doing when they first became aware of this decision to be potentially staring at a long-term working remotely situation. And some organizations had started to move in that direction. I remember Credit Suisse had already started to move into a split rotation arrangement prior to the formal announcement of lockdown, and some of our offices had already moved in that direction. And then eventually, when the lockdown information came, we had to ensure, obviously, first and foremost, the health and safety of our employees and enabling an infrastructure which allows individual in a safe and controlled environment to be able to access work and work related things. So we had to invest significantly in technology. We had to invest significantly in helping managers build trust and empathy, because while you can have technology, despite its kind of own challenges and advantages, kind of still cannot substitute for trust. And trust is the foundation for individuals to be able to delivering to their best and individuals to be progressing. So the foundational investment in technology, in addition to how can you build trust in a remote environment, how can you build empathy, became kind of paramount importance. And in fact, we were kind of pleasantly surprised to see some of the managers display that on their own. Once that happened, then what became important for us to do was to make sure we are able to replicate an objective, fair, unbiased evaluation in a kind of technique which was predominantly prevalent in a physical world to a virtual world. So greater reliance on assessments, greater reliance on training on managers on how to conduct bias-free, what we call behavioral interviews, greater reliance on bringing in more objectivity by making sure our interview panel is of diverse individuals. It doesn't limit one's chances of being considered, because kind of there will be instances when we will have kind of unfortunate, unexpected power blackouts, and those are things that one cannot plan for, but sometimes these things happen. So making sure that decisions on evaluation are not based on those instances. We've also realized some individuals are good at interviewing in a remote setup, and some people perhaps take some time. So we've been running sessions with prospective candidates on how to interview remotely, what to keep an eye out for, what not to do, as an example. So some of those aspects, and a great example of that, something which we share, is avoid use of virtual backgrounds, because while on one hand it may seem like you're trying to minimize the distraction of the background, and maybe you're pretending to be at a beach or a seaside or somewhere, what sometimes it does is it takes away the substance of the conversation. It is okay for people to see what's behind my background.
Yeah.
That's going to be, everybody recognizes we are operating from remotely, perhaps most probably our homes. I'm in my son's room, as an example, and that's what the pictures are of him at the background, and that is okay. I don't think we need to be apologetic about it. So some of these simple things, I think we allowed candidates to look at it. But again, like I said, I go back to the foundational things of what we assess for do not change. We just had to invest in technology to make sure we can replicate that environment and do it in a bias free, objective manner, and we've seen some good results of that, and that investment continues going forward as well.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the fact that you're in your son's room, and it really hits home the fact that things are so different, and we have to be empathetic of the fact, especially with job seekers, and understand that for them. My next question is: do you have any easy tips for candidates that can potentially help them stand out in a Credit Suisse virtual interview?
Yes, I think starting with what I've mentioned, kind of make sure, depending upon the format of the interview, if you're doing a video interview, kind of our advice is kind of make sure you are against some kind of a natural background. Try and avoid virtual backgrounds as much as possible. Make sure you're looking at kind of investing in some kind of good quality headsets as much as possible. Try and not use the kind of the devices microphone or speaker, because while the speaker may be okay, but the microphone will perhaps give an echo of the ambient environment. So again, try and invest in that. We've also suggested to candidates, if possible, invest in a small inexpensive UPS for your Wi-Fi router, because you don't care about the electricity going off, you care about the electricity to your Wi-Fi going off, which can obviously disconnects everybody. And these are fairly inexpensive kind of investments. Assuming we get the infrastructure out of the way, I think in a virtual environment, one of the things that we recommend to candidates to do more so than before is shorter sentences, more direct, more specific, and use some spacing in between and use silence. So when you have responded, stop, clarify, is this in line with what you were looking for? Is this what you were expecting? That allows the conversation to progress well. Some of the other things that we've also seen is use an example wherever possible. So instead of providing generic situations and generic responses, give an example that closely resembles the question being asked. For example, when I was in this role, I did this. These were the actions I took. These were the results that happened, which then relates to the individual. So those aspects then allow the individuals to gain not just clarity, but also preciseness in their communication to move the conversation forward.
Awesome. That is actually very clear, and I think we are also practicing some of that during this webinar, where we're using, a microphone that is not actually the laptop microphone, and keeping it very easy to, I think. My penultimate question to you before we start taking questions from viewers: what are the additional steps that Credit Suisse has been taking to ensure a great candidate experience during this pandemic, be it a virtual interviews or onboarding?
Sure. I think the first is recognizing that we need to acknowledge each individual and begin to answer some questions that they may be on the mind. So, if you're a candidate, I think the question which perhaps a number of them are asking is not just about how will I be evaluated, how will I be doing, but is there an expectation for me to show up to work tomorrow? Because I may not be comfortable, right? And I think that's the first question which a lot of people are asking, and we being upfront about it, saying at this point in time, there is no expectations for anybody to be working from the office unless your job is critical and requires that to be the case, in which case we will have that discussion upfront, which allows you to plan. There are individuals, and like we started beginning of the conversation, I work out of Pune, but I am in Delhi at the moment. And there are many such individuals in my team who are in different parts of the country to be with their family, to be with their friends, whereas their work location is different. So I think the first thing is sharing that transparently with them about the flexibility that we have, and the health and safety remains primarily important. The second aspect is kind of how do you convey the culture of the organization during this period, and a lot of that is therefore making sure we continue to have some kind of a human connect. So what would have happened previously during an in-person interview, we're making sure there is at least 1 or 2 rounds of video interaction, which is not just answering and evaluating you, but also helping you clarify what is it to work in that environment, what could you expect, so how would you get onboarded, how would you given the material and access to systems, for example, and kind of the arrangements associated with that. The candidates are also then invited to obviously reach out to individuals they may already know in their network who are working here, because kind of the best source of kind of the so-called true and authentic information about the organization is people you already know, who will perhaps speak in an unbiased manner. So creating that opportunities. And finally, I think what we've done is we moved everything online, which allows individuals to consume this at their own pace, which allows individuals to then recognize what's important. So instead of trying to fit everything on day one, we're saying, all right, here is what needs to be accomplished. Why don't you pace yourself? We realized, for example, in number of instances, we've had to adjust to our individual schedules. We've had some young mothers who said, hey, I can log in early, but I need a break around, maybe let's say about 12 to 1. Sure, kind of plan your days around some of those personal commitments as well. Somebody kind of commented, we're not working from home, we're sleeping at work. So depending upon how you look at it, how do you make some of these integrate, and don't not look at them as concessions, but really core to who we are. So that allows some of these things to happen more seamlessly, and creating that what I call the human element of it. And I think if companies kind of show that side of it, which many of them are already doing, I think it goes a long way, because people are looking for is trust, security, safety, comfort, and obviously then it allows me to focus on, will I grow, will I develop, will I learn from a career standpoint. But the foundational element right now is trust and of safety and security, and I think that's what we're trying to make sure people understand.
That's great answer, Prashant, and it really brings home the fact that I think personally the flexibility that working from home has given me, I've come to really truly appreciate it. I've been, as you said, as you mentioned earlier, you might just need to run errands sometimes in the middle of the day, and that's not a big problem anymore. As long as everything gets done, it's a great experience. My
Yeah.
final question for you before we jump into viewer questions, and this one might be hard for you to keep short, but if you had to call out just three things on why a candidate should join Credit Suisse, what would they be? And I'm sure there are more than three things on why you should join Credit Suisse, but we're just trying to like filter it.
Sure. I think the way we look at it is, there is the industry and the space we operate in. There are the results that we have delivered, but there are the foundational beliefs that we have, right? So you spoke about who we are in terms of our business focus, leading wealth manager, strong investment banking capabilities, recognized as a leading wealth manager in a number of years across many countries and businesses we operate in. We've been around for over 160 years, driven on the promise of entrepreneurship, driven on the promise and the foundation of making progress. Those are the founding beliefs of the organization. When it comes to people, one of the things that people tell us that they are drawn to the organization is the opportunity to build career within the bank as opposed to having to look externally. So a number of individuals have been with the bank for many, many years because they moved internally and taken on progressively different and increasingly more responsibilities. So the opportunity to what we call move within the bank and take up internal mobility is a big thing. So if you're looking at making a career beyond your first job and expand, that's an opportunity. And that could be international as well, not just limited to kind of moves within one country or region. The second aspect of it is that we are operating in an industry which is still foundational to how the economy works. If you are if you are a company, how do you grow? You grow by investing. How do you raise money? You raise money by either kind of taking loans. You raise money by going to the primary market, secondary markets. You raise money by kind of acquiring companies, or you acquire companies, and for that also you need money. So there are these aspects of it. So we make trade happen through various mechanisms in place, right? So for us, that's a foundational element of how the business works. And for us to be doing that and being viewed as a leader in that space consistently year over year, must be doing some things well. And thirdly, if you're a candidate who cares about the environmental, social, and governance responsibilities as well, not just caring about the profits, that's a place that we continue to remain focused on. We do so much in the space, not just because we are mandated to, but because we want to. And that for us is a big example of how we are enabling many of these communities we operate in advancing, whether it is the helping the youth kind of stay away from situations which will get them into dangerous territories, by helping them gain life skills, education skills, by helping girl childs kind of again gain meaningful skills. So our contribution in the communities that we work in also allows us to move forward. So those are the things I would say. If you're looking for building a career in an industry which is foundational to how trade gets done and kind of operate with the player which is recognized, I think that's who we are. We are a company which allows one to build career in the organization as opposed to having to move outside. So you can have many, many years in different roles within the organization. And finally, it matters to us in the communities we serve and operate in, and giving everybody an opportunity to contribute toward that is of importance to us. And if any of these things appeal to you, then absolutely check out some of the jobs that we have on our website.
Excellent. I really love that. The fact that supporting the community at large is a big part of what is to work at Credit Suisse, because I have heard from several job seekers that it's a very big convincing factor for them. With that, we're going to start open to the Q&A section with viewer Q&As. All our viewers, you can please continue to put in your questions for Prashant in the comment section, and we'll take up and answer as many as possible. By the way, you can apply for jobs at Credit Suisse on the link provided in the comments, pinned on top of the comments page. Also, in case you missed that, now you can also, there is also a link to the jobs live on the campaign page right now. So please go ahead and if you feel that Credit Suisse is the right company for you and you think you can bring value to the organization, I highly urge you to go ahead and apply for that job. And let's get started with some of the questions. First question, what is Credit Suisse strategy to hire freshers in 2021? Are there any campus recruitment plans that you can talk about? I know this is a big question for many people.
Sure. Credit Suisse continues to tap into campus as we were doing previously. We recruit from a number of business schools, engineering schools, graduate schools for a variety of jobs, not just in technology, but also in areas of risk finance. In fact, in 2021, we have upwards of 200 internship opportunities up for grabs, and you can learn more about some of these again on our website to learn about what we have. Excuse me, as many of you are familiar, the campus recruiting season has already started. So we're already visiting colleges, albeit virtually, on a Saturday, on a Sunday, over a Zoom platform, perhaps not necessarily physical presence and visits. So some of these things have started. We recruit from a select set of colleges and universities, and those activities are already underway. And we see no change in our approach to bringing on talent, which is fresh, which allows us to gain from their experiences and unique perspectives.
Excellent. My next question, you may have answered a little bit of this already, so you can just build on that. What is the plan for remote onboarding of new joinees by Credit Suisse? How do you ensure that training and team rapport is built in a seamless manner? And that's I just want to add to that question. There is this level of knowledge that comes officially through the organization, and then there is knowledge that comes unofficially through your peers, and I feel like some of that is lost. So how is Credit Suisse trying to overcome some of those with your onboarding?
Yes, no, absolutely, you're right about it. I think the way to think about it is there are what we call systems related onboarding. You need to make sure you have access to our systems. You need to make sure you have access to all the benefits, enrollment, and kind of all of those aspects of it. And then there is the onboarding associated with knowledge, onboarding associated with your specific job, onboarding associated with what the responsibilities of you will be in that place. What we focused on is obviously through virtual onboarding, enable individuals to get remote access anywhere, any part of in theory world, but obviously because of sensitive reasons and taxation, for anybody working with us in India, it doesn't matter which location officially you will eventually be working from, you can get remote access from anywhere. What that then allows you is you can access our systems as if you were working from office as opposed to working from home. So once you get the systems aspects out of the way, then the next element of the onboarding is really making sure individuals know what is our founding belief, what do we value, what are the principles that are kind of important for us, perhaps non-negotiables. What is it kind of that it is important for you to know in terms of how to recognize, how to reward, how to grow, how to plan careers, and so on and so forth. And then there are what I call business and role specific onboarding. So let's say you're joining a technology team. One of the things you need to know is what is the infrastructure of technology? How does that work? What are the tools that we use? What are the methodologies that we use? What are the frameworks that we use? Because there are many available externally, but we may not be using all of them. We may have chosen some of those things. Being a bank, what's also important for us is to talk about some of the data privacy and cyber kind of security related considerations, given more so it's important. What does that mean? What the implications are for us as an example. So some of those part kind of form part of it. And once you are then on the job, then the next conversation is about, okay, what are the goals for you? What do you need to do over the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? What things you need to learn? If you're a fresher, it's a very different experience compared to somebody who's experienced, where the experienced person has to understand the context of the organization. Fresher not just has to understand the context, but they may have to learn skills as well. So how do you build that kind of is going to be critical as well. That's how we enable that virtual onboarding. And kind of we've had a number of instances where it has worked seamlessly, and we continue to look at kind of other aspects of it. For example, after you've done this, some of the programs are also fostered towards how do you build trust in a remote setup. To your point, one is how do you get that information, which is these so-called unique to the organization, but is typically shared over a water cooler conversation.
Yeah.
There isn't a water cooler conversation happening. It is not in the strictest sense of the physical word. So how do you create that? And then for how can you create those in situations as well? So those are the aspects that we are kind of doing and focused on, and so far so good. And I'm sure there will be new things along the way that we will continue to focus on as well.
Thank you so much for that answer. And that really helps a lot of people. Uh, my next question is, and this one is really interesting. What are some of the initiatives taken by Credit Suisse to upskill their existing employees? And I want to add, I'm adding to that question as well, like how has this COVID scenario affected these plans or changed these plans is a better way?
Sure. So let's try and kind of answer the question both in terms of skilling initiatives, but also the role of the organization and the individuals. The way we look at it is, so firstly, kind of COVID situation necessitated that everything moved to a virtual format, not just our onboarding, but also our learning, right? Some learning which was being delivered in a classroom format through instructor led, as we said, kind of had to be moved to a virtual environment. So that kind of meant some of those programs initially had to be deferred before they can be rolled out in a virtual setup. We look at organizations' role as creating, think of it as a map. And the map provides visibility into different possible career trajectories one can take. What one wishes to take is unique to them. We are not prescribing that you take this path versus that path, because what appeals to one individual may or may not appeal to the other individual. Associated with those kind of career maps are a set of core capabilities. These are capabilities associated with the job. So for example, if you are in a field where there is a lot of manual work being performed today, you realize there is an automation coming along the way. So how can you build new skills and perspectives around automation? And again, there are various tools associated with automation. It could be simple and too sophisticated. Similarly, if you are in an industry like ours, which is highly regulated, there are always new regulations being passed for which you have to comply with. So keeping pace with that, making sure our people are fully familiar and available and accessible to those programs. And then there are some programs where we need people to be able to develop new skills, kind of whether it is, let's say, a coaching for a senior leader, as an example. It is certain certification, which we don't necessarily have. So working through our partner network, working through our understanding of what we need, and yet allowing flexibility for individuals to tap into additional resources which will allow growth. But it starts by first beginning to identify what shape do I want my career to take? And for those future aspired roles, what capabilities I might need, which I don't have today, and therefore, how do we bridge? A lot of times people assume new capability bridging is only through learning or training program. A lot of that can actually be crafted in your job by maybe shadowing somebody else, by creating those stretch assignments for you. So I think start by identifying and articulating their aspirations, and then work backwards to identify those capabilities required in those aspirations and how can we build those.
Thanks for that, Prashant. And I'm going through the questions, and then there are a couple that seem to be repeating themselves. And these are just the last few questions I'm going to ask you. And I think the best way is Credit Suisse is famous for being in the BFSI sector. And some of this, I see two questions here where they're asking about the scope of employment for, just from a tech perspective with Credit Suisse and with cybersecurity, especially in some cases. But I'm going to put it in a single question. What are the tech opportunities at Credit Suisse right now?
Sure. So technology is disrupting every industry. Banking is not immune to it, if you think about it. The core act of banking is enabled by technology, but also technology enables a lot of collaboration. Technology enables a lot of foundational stuff. We won't be able to have this conversation, but for technology, as an example, right?
Yes.
So we continue to invest in what we call our core banking, core applications, which are not going away overnight. But not just as employees, but our consumers are also now wanting to engage with bank in a technology kind of way. So developing a lot of those interactions with technology for our kind of use by consumers is an area we are investing in. Cybersecurity continues to be a big focus for us as also for others. How to make sure we're building that kind of systems which are likely to be targeted, being targeted previously as well, being a bank, but even more so. So how do we build that security in our infrastructure? We've moved from a very safe in the office kind of secured environment to literally 90% remote, kind of in the individual's workspace. So how do you build in and introduce additional security measures, which is not necessarily just cyber, but other security measures? So we, for example, conduct a lot of phishing tests ourselves to know kind of if this is something which an individual may fall victim to. And then obviously if somebody does that, then they are kind of recommended to attend some additional trainings and how to keep an eye out for and so forth. So cyber awareness as an example, not just this. And continue to invest in kind of infrastructure related work as well. So technology continues to be an exciting space for us. We have a number of jobs globally within the bank in technology, not just in India. And technology is foundation to who we are, and it's an exciting place to be working with us.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm sure a lot of the job seekers would appreciate an answer. And with that, I'm coming to my last question. And this one is an important one. It's talking about diversity hiring. What is Credit Suisse doing differently to hire diverse candidates? And I think I was looking at a few other questions here, and I think I should highlight also, and I think from an age perspective, what kind of diversities is Credit Suisse looking at as well when you're hiring?
Sure. Some of our practices to bring in diverse talent is obviously not just contextual to a region or a market, but it is also contextual to what is applicable under the countries that we operate in. In certain countries, for example, it is acceptable to ask prior backgrounds. In certain countries, it is not acceptable even to ask, for example, prior compensation history, something which we take for granted, let's say, in a market like India. Yeah. So many of our practices, therefore, have to have that element of what is possible and what is a good practice. When we look at bringing in diverse talent, and diversity could take many shapes, whether it is around gender, whether it is around sexual orientation, whether it is around age, ethnicity. What we are looking for is the diversity in thinking and diversity in thoughts. So first steps are making sure we partner with organizations, we partner with institutes and bodies that allow us to tap into this diverse talent, that allow us to identify such diverse talent and kind of where these talent is perhaps available looking for roles and opportunities. Identification is not sufficient, because how do you then build your assessment techniques? How do you build your evaluation techniques that make sure that a diverse candidate is not disadvantaged because of certain other kind of aspects of it? So sensitization programs, interview training programs to look at objective evaluation. For example, one of the things that we share with our interviewers is when you're evaluating candidates, you don't compare one candidate to another, you compare candidate to the selection criteria. So it isn't about whether candidate A is better than candidate B. It is about candidate A versus the selection criteria, candidate B versus the selection criteria. These are foundational but important shifts, because as evaluators, many times you compare two candidates, but you lose sight of what was the evaluation criteria. Similarly, we're also focused on making sure that we identify what are the core requirements in the job and what are what we call good to know. Because sometimes we've seen in our experience individuals who get disadvantaged or differentiated against were perhaps differentiated against based on some of the good to know. So again, breaking some of those stereotypes, breaking some of those kind of old, sometimes unconscious biases that may be in existence, that allows us to do. Holding managers accountable. We've also introduced a number of measures which says if a manager is, for example, kind of not looking at kind of in this example, if the manager is not looking at bringing on diverse talent, then providing an explanation. Did you interview a diverse talent? Why did you not consider evaluating a diverse talent? We're not necessarily insisting they hire, but why was a diverse talent not even considered, as an example? And a lot of those tracking mechanisms along the way. So I think those are some of the things being focused on, right from identification to sensitization to training to clarifying some of the do's and don'ts, making sure our evaluation criteria are fair, transparent, kind of bias free, and then making sure those integrations happen. I think some of those techniques have worked well for us, and then constantly measuring, constantly evaluating what is working, what isn't working is important. We also invest in certain tools which allow us more diverse candidates and applications to apply. There are some tools like that based on how the certain jobs are worded. It allows greater diverse applications to come in. So a lot of that investment and focus is something we continue to look at.
Thanks, Prashant. That is a lot of work that Credit Suisse is doing to make sure you're hiring diverse. I have to really commend you on that. I think diversity it can be the success. There are a lot of studies that say diverse organizations tend to be more productive, more successful as well. And I'm really looking forward to this. And that sort of brings us to the end. Thanks so much, Prashant, for being a part of this and for giving us this sneak peek, as I would say, into Credit Suisse and its hiring.
Thank you, Rohan, for the opportunity. I hope your audience found this useful, and you can learn more about it on our website and also learn about the jobs that we have. But thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Prashant, and thanks so much. I'm sure the audience found this really interesting. I apologize if we couldn't get to your answers. I apologize for the small technical glitches in the beginning. Everything ended on a good note. And that's all for now, but we will be live again today at 4 p.m. with UST Global. So please don't forget to tune in then as well. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.